A very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new episode of Africa Today, a program that brings you all the latest news from the African continent. My name is Angie Meher and I'll be joining you for today's edition of the show. And as usual, we begin straight away with a look at some of the news making the headlines. And we start, of course, with Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov, who's arrived in Uganda on the third stop of a tour of African countries. He started his tour with a visit to Egypt, followed by Congo and then Uganda. We have more details in this report.
A Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman announced on Monday that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was welcomed in Uganda's capital Entebbe by his Ugandan counterpart Jeje Odongo. Entebbe is a town close to the capital Kampala and is where the international airport is located. According to the Russian TASS news agency, Lavrov is due to hold talks on Tuesday with Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni. On Sunday, the government said on Twitter it was a two-day visit. It said President Yoweri Museveni, who last visited Russia in 2019, has called for stronger bilateral relations, especially in the areas of defense and security, economic and technical cooperation. On his first stop in Cairo on Sunday, Lavrov reassured Cairo that orders for Russian grain would be met. The development came hot on the heels of a landmark deal Russia and Ukraine signed on Friday with the United Nations and Turkey aimed at relieving a global food crisis caused by blocked Black Sea grain deliveries. Lavrov has also visited Congo-Brazzaville and is later due in Ethiopia.
We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest for this afternoon, His Excellency Ambassador Gamel Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon to you. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. And let me start, Mr. Ambassador, by asking you, how do you see, the timing of the Russian Foreign Minister's visit to Egypt as well as to Africa as a whole?
It is very important, the visit, and much more important, the timing. He's coming to listen to us, to share opinion with us, what's going on in the problems of our world about the Ukrainian war, about what happened in Jeddah. Because here we are about a good success for the Egyptian and the Arab diplomacy in that meeting with the American president, where he came with an agenda which is not exactly our favorite agenda. He came to establish a sort of a NATO between the Arabs and our neighbors, saying that Iran is the enemy. Iran doesn't have any nuclear weapon up till now, while our neighbor is occupying the Syrian Golan, and they have 300 head wars of nuclear weapons. They have rockets. They have everything against what the international community would refuse. Even so, he wants us to be allies to this neighbor. So the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs took the initiative, and before the visit of the President Biden, we declared that we are not anyhow declaring any NATO pact against Iran. Iran also answered with a favorable answer, appraising the Egyptian declaration. Then in Jeddah, it was quite clear that we said the word to our guests. The United States is a partner, and we are keen to continue our partnership with America. But at the same time, America must study quite well our priorities, and
absolutely.
not to point to the wrong enemy. We need to point to the right enemy and to solve all our problems.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, how do you describe ties between Russia and the African continent as a whole, as we've seen the Russian Foreign Minister now also continuing on his tour, where he has gone to Congo and now Uganda?
Yes, of course, there is an African depth in this visit, because Africa, of course, is a part of our world which is not well treated. Africa is always claiming that Africa is sending money to the developed world much more than it receives, because it's paying its debts, it's paying the invoice of its imports much more than it receives of investments or it receives as a result of its exports. And this must be tackled in a good way.
Yes.
Egypt did a good effort there, where the European Union agreed to the idea of our foreign ministry to invest in Africa with the Egyptian experience, so all the parties can benefit from this formula.
Absolutely.
And I think the Russians are not far from this.
Absolutely. And speaking about investments, Lavrov said both Moscow and Cairo are discussing founding a Russian industrial zone in Egypt. How do you see trade exchange between Egypt and Russia, and how important is this kind of relationship on an economic front?
It is still very good, but not as we wish, because Russia and the Eastern Bloc were our main trade partners up to the 70s. By more than 60% of our trade. Now this diminished to 11% only, and this is a very important market for us. We can of course come back to this market in order to export more, to receive more investment, and here we are always proud of the first big project or mammoth project, the Swan High Dam, which was built with the help of the Russians. Now they are building the largest electricity project in Tabaq nuclear power station. And of course they are going to invest in the Suez Canal zone. All this we want to widen it, deepen it. We have all the results and all the environment needed to do that. And we are doing this with Russia, with all the Eastern European countries, with Romania, with Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, all of these countries. We are coming back to see them. Lately, our president visited Belgrade, which was also a good partner of our foreign relations and foreign trade.
Absolutely. And Mr. Ambassador, we also saw during his visit to Egypt, Lavrov addressed the Arab League. Why do you see Russia keen to show its stance to the Arab world?
Of course, any eminent guest coming to Cairo, he must look forward to see the 22 Arab countries in one session. And it is a sort of a good occasion. Always our eminent guests do it always. We have seen the Foreign Affairs Commissioner of Europe also visited the Arab League and made a good speech there. And there also I told her, you are putting the wrong priority, mentioning the wrong enemy. Anyway, this is a good occasion to talk to the 22 Arab member states, to talk to Ahmad Abul Ghait, the Secretary General, who can rightly express the Arab position. This is a good custom we have to encourage.
Yes, and we've seen, in his address, Lavrov saying the Middle East is pivotal for international peace and stability. How do you see his comments and his address to the League?
I think we agree a lot about the main concerns on the international level: the Ukraine problem, the Corona problem, the threat of the organized crime, whether it is terrorism or drug trafficking or illegal migration. All these problems we are agreed upon how to tackle it. Also, they discuss with us the regional problems. Russia in Syria, where we should listen to the Russian leaders to tell us what are they doing in Syria, what is their position in all other places, such as in Iraq or in Yemen. And then the third file is our bilateral relations, which is getting a good push during the direct contact between President Putin and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. and now with this visit of the foreign minister.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, an Arab-Russian forum was to take place, but of course, due to the current events, this was delayed. How do you see, forums impacting both sides, and how can they be utilized to further develop?
It is very important, and it is a good initiative which was initiated by the Arab League several times. We have an Euro-Arab dialogue since 1974. We have the Gulf European dialogue. We have the Euro-Mediterranean dialogue, which includes Egypt and the Arab Mediterranean countries. We have the Arab League countries vis-a-vis China. We have several conferences with China, with Japan, with Africa. So coming with Russia now is a good addition to our Arab foreign policy.
Absolutely. And finally, Mr. Ambassador, how do you see, the prospect for finding a political solution to the Ukrainian crisis in the near future?
Here, one of the main reason of the visit,
yes,
which is the role of the Arab League, because as you well know, the 7 foreign ministers of the Arab League, among them was Sameh Shukri, our minister, they went to Moscow. We are ready to be a good mediator between the Russians and the West, between the Russians and Ukraine itself. And we hope that we can see now a sort of light in the end of the tunnel, because Russia allowed now the shipments of cereals from Ukraine. Also, in Europe, they are ready to diminish the punishment against Russia. So let us hope that this will take more and more place in this sort of very complicated relations, and to come again with a good solution, because we cannot tolerate at all a war like that, or a bigger war like this.
Absolutely right. Your Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very, very much, sir, for your time and your insight, and for joining us on today's edition of Africa Today. And moving to more news, French President Emmanuel Macron arrived late Monday in Cameroon at the start of a 3-nation tour of Western Africa. The visit reportedly aims at rebooting France's post-colonial relationship with the African continent. More details.
President Emmanuel Macron was welcomed at the airport of Yaoundé by Cameroonian Prime Minister Joseph Dion Ngouté. The first trip of his new term outside Europe, which will also take him to Benin and Guinea-Bissau, should allow Macron to show the commitment of the president in the process of renewing the relationship with the African continent, as officials said. Macron's talks Tuesday at the presidential palace with his counterpart, Paul Biya, 89, discussed security in Cameroon, which has been riven by ethnic violence and an insurgency by Anglophone separatists who have been fighting for independence for 2 English-speaking provinces since 2017. Macron had provoked Biya's indignation in 2020 after declaring he would apply maximum pressure on the president over intolerable violence in the West African country. His visit comes at a time when former colonial power France has seen its influence decline in the face of China, India and Germany, particularly in the economic and commercial sectors. He will end the day in Noah village, hosted by former tennis champion Yannick Noah, who is developing a leisure and education center in a popular district of Yaoundé, where he lives for several months a year. Macron will move on Wednesday to Benin. Benin was long praised for its thriving multi-party democracy.
And for our final news item, 8 migrants drowned off Morocco after their inflatable boat sank whilst trying to reach Spain's Canary Islands. The details.
Authorities on Monday retrieved the bodies of 8 migrants off the southern shores of the North African kingdom. Officials said their inflatable boat sank near the coastal town of Agafinir in Tarfaya province as it tried to reach Spain's Canary Islands. Another 18 migrants, most of them African, survived and were detained for questioning. Morocco is a key transit point on routes taken by migrants seeking better lives in Europe. Last month, at least 23 people died trying to climb border fences into the Spanish enclave of Melilla on Morocco's Mediterranean coast. Rights groups say at least 37 migrants died, a toll higher than the official figure. It was the worst recorded death toll in years of attempts by migrants to enter Kita and Melilla, the two main land borders between Africa and the European Union. Migrant charity Caminando Frontieras says almost 1,000 migrants died or were reported missing at sea in the first half of the year as they tried to reach Spain.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of today's edition of Africa Today. You were in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for joining us.